Welcome to the Old Roads Podcast, a podcast that seeks to bring the wisdom of the past to the challenges of the present. I am your host, Aaron O'Kelly. I'm a pastor and a theological educator. I want to raise the question today, what happened at the Southern Baptist Convention 2025? Last month, the Southern Baptist Convention convened for its annual meeting in Dallas this year, and I want to give a report having been at that meeting and then talk about the way forward for the Southern Baptist Convention. I'm going to try to do so without getting too deep into the weeds because I know not all my listeners are Southern Baptists. However, do keep in mind, the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, and it has the largest mission-sending force and theological education force among evangelicals in the United States, and I believe in the world as well. And so, whether or not you're Southern Baptist, if you are an evangelical Christian, what happens in the Southern Baptist Convention is of concern to you because it is a convention with great influence, not only in the mission force it sends, but in the pastors and leaders it trains through its seminaries. So having come back from Dallas and having been at the meeting, I want to give you an overview of some of the positives and the negatives from SBC 2025. Here are the positives. We saw about 50 new missionaries commissioned with the International Mission Board, and that is always an encouraging time to see more and more people that the Lord is sending out into the harvest fields around the world to share the gospel. There was the re-election of President Clint Presley. I'm a big fan of Clint Presley. I think he did a great job this year leading our convention and at the meeting moderating the meeting as president. And so he was reelected to a second year, and that will be the extent of his term. That's the term limit. But it was good to see him elected again, as he is one who represents a more conservative leadership than we have seen over the last number of years. We also had some excellent resolutions that were passed, and usually these are the newsmaker items that come out of the Southern Baptist Convention. The Southern Baptist Convention passes resolutions every year at its convention, and these are statements that address public issues, and they represent the convention taking a stand on these issues. These are usually moral or ethical or political issues that the convention wants to speak to. Well, this year we had some great ones because we had a great committee that was led by Andrew Walker of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. There was a resolution that called for the overturning of the Obergefell decision from 2015. That was the decision that legalized gay marriage in all 50 states. If you read any headline about the Southern Baptist Convention, it was probably that Southern Baptists are explicitly calling for the overturning of that Supreme Court decision. That shouldn't be news to anybody who knows Southern Baptists, but the media thought it was at least newsworthy to report that. We also had other very good resolutions that were passed, one calling for the banning of pornography in our society, which again is a very strong moral stance that Southern Baptists are taking as we are addressing the issues that confront us today. There were other positive things, but I'll turn now to some negatives. And before I do, I want to define some terms just to keep you in the loop of this discussion. When I speak about entities of the Southern Baptist Convention, I'm talking about the various institutions that are under the purview of the SBC. So we're talking about the two mission boards, the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board, and the 6 seminaries that are under the Southern Baptist Convention's authority. So we've got mission boards and we've got seminaries for theological education. And then there's really one other entity. There's a few more auxiliary organizations, but the one other entity besides the seminaries and mission boards is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the ERLC. So when I say entities, I'm talking about these mission boards, seminaries, and ERLC. Each one of these institutions has its own board of trustees, and these trustees oversee each one of these entities of the SBC. One other term I want you to understand is the term cooperative program. The cooperative program is a funding mechanism that was started in 1925, so we celebrated 100 years of the cooperative program this year. And it's a funding mechanism by which these entities receive support from Southern Baptists. And here's how it works. It's cooperative because it involves cooperation between the churches, the state Baptist convention, so Baptists organize at different levels. So one of the levels is at the state level, and at the national level, which is the Southern Baptist Convention. So here's how it works. In the cooperative program, if your church designates a portion of its general offerings to the cooperative program, here's how it would work. Let's say your church says, we're going to give 10% to the cooperative program. What that means is your church then takes 10% of the offerings you give that are not otherwise designated, and those offerings are sent to your state convention. So here in, let's say, Tennessee, where I live, a church gives 10% to the state convention, Tennessee, and now Tennessee, having collected that, will typically, state conventions vary on how they do this, but typically about 50% of that will stay in the state and be used for state-level ministries. So here in Tennessee, we've got Union University that is supported. We've got various other ministries that are supported throughout our state. So about half of our cooperative program dollars go there. And then the other half, Tennessee, then the State Convention of Tennessee sends on to the Southern Baptist Convention. And that money is then divided up among the entities that I mentioned a while ago, the two mission boards, the seminaries, and the ERLC. And there's a different funding percentage for each one of those. So it's a very streamlined process. Each one of these entities, in other words, doesn't have to go out to the churches directly and ask for money. There's a mechanism by which they all get funded through the sharing that happens in the cooperative program. And so traditionally, at least for the last 100 years, to be Southern Baptist has almost meant that you support the cooperative program. Now, you're not required to. The Southern Baptist Convention actually allows for supporting its entities in other ways, but the main mechanism of supporting the SBC has been through the cooperative program for the last 100 years. Now, I just wanted to get that out of the way so that you'll be able to follow the discussion that's here about to follow. All right, so let's talk about the negatives from the SBC 2025. Number one, the Sanchez Amendment failed to pass. Now, let me define what I'm talking about with the Sanchez Amendment. This used to be called the Law Amendment. It was named for Mike Law, who first proposed it. Now it's named for Juan Sanchez, who is the one who's been leading the charge for it recently. But it was an amendment to the Southern Baptist Convention Constitution that would clearly put into practice what our statement of faith already says. Our statement of faith already says that women cannot be pastors. The Sanchez Amendment would then move that into the Constitution so that we would clearly define that you can only be in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention as a church if you do not have any female pastors of any kind on your church staff or in your church body. That was proposed by Juan Sanchez again, and there's a high threshold to amend the SBC Constitution. Rightfully, it shouldn't be easy to amend a document like your convention's Constitution. So the threshold is 2/3 of the messengers there should vote in support, and you got to do that 2 years in a row. We got very close the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, but it fell just short of what was needed in 24. So it came up again here in 2025, and it fell short. It was about 60% of the vote in favor. That's still a very strong majority, but we needed 2/3. We needed 67%, so we were about 7% shy of getting what we needed to make that a clear policy in our Constitution. So what that means is the problem of female pastors in the SBC, or at least women who are functioning with some kind of pastoral role, that's going to be a problem that remains. And it will keep coming up year after year until we resolve this. The SBC has been very clear in saying that women cannot be pastors in our statement of faith, but we have not been as clear in enforcing that in our actual policies. So this is where the battle continues to rage, and the issue is not going to go away. It's going to keep coming up. As long as there are churches in the SBC that have women serving as pastors in some way, we're going to keep debating this. And so having failed to achieve the threshold we needed this year, I imagine in some form or fashion, the Sanchez Amendment will come up again next year, and we will try again. But those who want conservative reform in the convention are not going to give up. And as we can see from the vote total, 60% are there. It doesn't take a whole lot more to put it over the threshold. So even though this is a negative, I do think conservatives still have reason to be encouraged that we can push this over the finish line if we keep fighting. Second, another negative, there was a push for greater financial transparency among our entities, and that did not pass. And here's what I mean when I say a push for greater financial transparency. Churches of the Southern Baptist Convention cannot access 990 level information about our entities. When I say 990, I'm talking about the IRS Form 990, which is what most nonprofits have to fill out every year to disclose financial information. Churches don't have to fill out Form 990, and entities of the Southern Baptist Convention seem to be categorized more like churches, and that's why they don't have to fill it out either. Now, what this means then is that the information that would be public from an IRS Form 990 is not, in fact, public for churches of the SBC. So, as a Southern Baptist, I cannot know what all the sources of revenue are for the various entities of our convention. I don't know where they're getting all their funding. I don't know their executive compensation. I don't know information about legal fees that they might have to pay out or about conflicts of interest involved in their finances, because I, as a Southern Baptist, am not allowed to see that information. Now, the push from those in leadership in the convention who opposed more financial transparency has been to say, well, we have a trustee system. The messengers and the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention don't need this information. Only the trustees do. But I've heard from a number of trustees or a number of people who are in touch with trustees that at least at some of our entities, even most of the trustees don't have this information. And it seems that our trustee boards are governed by very small groups. There are committees on the trustee boards who seem to have all the information and seem to make most of the decisions, but the trustee boards as a whole oftentimes don't seem to know this. Now, I'm not saying that's the case at all our entities, but it does seem to be the case, at least at some of them. So what we have here was a staunch resistance from our leadership at the SBC to say, we don't want to disclose more financial information and we don't think you need it. And sadly, most of the messengers agreed this year. So here we are. Most of the messengers to the Southern Baptist Convention have not called for more financial transparency. And I believe that is going to harm the cooperative program, because those who do want more financial transparency, such as myself and many others who agree with me, we're not a majority, but at least a lot of us want it. We're now left with the sense that leadership simply doesn't want us to have this information. And so not being able to see where our money's going is going to harm our ability to continue to give to the cooperative program as churches. That's not a decision that we as churches have made. That's a decision leadership has made by staunchly refusing to forward any more financial transparency measures through our convention. So I was very disappointed by that vote. And I don't know what it'll take to get the majority of messengers on board with financial transparency, but that was disappointing. And that I cannot help but think will harm the cooperative program. And then a third vote that didn't go the way I wanted was the vote to abolish the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. It did not pass. It was a vote brought by respected pastor Willie Rice, and I greatly admire Willie Rice for his willingness to bring that motion. It would not have actually abolished the ERLC this year. It would have put them on notice. It requires 2 consecutive years to abolish an entity, and it requires 50% vote plus 1. Now, the vote didn't pass, but it did receive about 43%. So we have about 43% of the messengers who want this entity put on notice, because we do not believe that the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission really does represent the Southern Baptist Convention. We don't see them doing effective work in Washington, D.C., and we don't see them representing our interests. And it seems that everyone who raises this concern is agreed that it's because of the work of the current president, Brent Leatherwood. Brent Leatherwood seems to be continuing the policies of past President Russell Moore, who has drifted very far from the Southern Baptist Convention at this point, as he's now general editor at Christianity Today. And we know Christianity Today stands at a very great distance theologically from the SBC. Brent Leatherwood's continuing many of the same Russell Moore policies at the ERLC. He has pushed for gun control measures that the majority of Southern Baptists do not support. He opposed a bill that would have abolished abortion and called for the prosecution of those who procure abortions in Louisiana. He signed onto a letter opposing that. He praised Joe Biden publicly when President Biden withdrew from the race last summer, basically repeating Democrat talking points. And that was the incident when he temporarily got fired and then rehired. I don't know if you're familiar with the details of that. You can look up that story. That's strange in and of itself. But we have an entity in the Southern Baptist Convention that is very divisive and very controversial. And I've said to many people since that vote of 43% saying, let's abolish the RLC. I'm a pastor. If 43% of my congregation said, we want you gone, I would not take that as a vote of confidence. I would not say, wow, I've got 57% of my church behind me. I can continue to lead. I would say, there's clearly some division I'm causing in this church, and I need to get out of here. I need to resign my office and let this church unite. If Brent Leatherwood had honor, he would do that. He would step down. He can find a position with the Republican Party or something, but he should step down out of a desire to unify this divided convention, because as long as he continues to lead the ERLC, he will cause division and continue to cause harm to the cooperative program, because there are many churches that are not able at this point to fund the cooperative program in good conscience. And so as long as the ERLC remains controversial, there are going to be churches who say, well, we can't support the cooperative program as a whole, and therefore that's less money for the International Mission Board. That's less money for our seminaries. That's less money for the mission efforts that we agree upon because of this one divisive entity. And so many churches that are thinking in that direction, I cannot actually blame them. I cannot actually put forth an argument that says, no, you must support the cooperative program. I understand completely why you wouldn't. Because you cannot in good conscience continue to fund an entity that has become so divisive and so at odds with where Southern Baptists stand on so many things. So what is the way forward if you are disappointed, as I am, after Dallas in 2025? Is it to leave the Southern Baptist Convention? I wouldn't recommend that. If conservative churches just leave, then the Southern Baptist Convention will get more liberal over time. Now, many churches may decide to pull back from the cooperative program, and I get that, and I think that may be a wise move for many churches, and may decide, well, let's not give to the cooperative program anymore. Let's not fund all the entities, but we can fund some of them directly. We can send money directly to the International Mission Board and fund it that way. We can send money directly to the seminaries we support. That may be the best way forward for many churches, because cooperation with a convention as a whole that is resistant to defining our stance on women in ministry, that is resistant to financial transparency, and that is not willing to abolish an entity or to call for strong reforms in an entity that has become so divisive, it just makes sense that cooperation is no longer fully possible for many churches. But don't leave altogether. Fund the entities that you can support, and then continue to let your voice be heard. Continue to go to the meetings. Continue to try to elect good, strong, conservative leadership, and over time, see what happens. If we can continue to elect conservative presidents, and if those presidents make conservative appointments, then we may see over time a reshaping of the institutions of the SBC. That's already happened once. It happened starting in 1979 with the so-called conservative resurgence. The SBC had gone in a very liberal direction among its institutions, but the grassroots conservative churches of the convention fought their way back, and they united and they elected conservative presidents year after year after year after year after year until eventually there was a trickle-down effect on all the trustee boards, and the institutions were regained for theological conservatism. I still believe that the fight for the SBC is worthwhile, that we have a mission that is worth fighting for, and we have strong infrastructure that is worth fighting for. And so as a conservative in the SBC, I call upon fellow conservatives and churches who are thinking in the same way I am. Let's not give up. Let's continue this fight and hope that we will see a stronger, more faithful Southern Baptist Convention in the coming years and coming decades. Let's stay united for the sake of this mission. If you benefited from our podcast, would you consider subscribing on your favorite app? Leave us a review and preferably 5 stars so that others can find us. Most importantly, share this podcast with a friend. If you have any questions you'd like to submit for a future Q&A episode, you can send those to theoldroadspodcast.com. And if you would like to support this ministry financially, you can also sign up as a patron at theoldroadspodcast.com. Until next time, remember Jeremiah 6:16. Thus says the Lord, stand by the roads and look, and ask for the ancient paths where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls.